Welcome back to The Critique. Today we are looking at a submission that tries to connect a major medical malpractice lawsuit to the Jeffrey Epstein funding network.
And it is ambitious. There's some really solid research, some real digging.
There is, but the delivery, the tone, it seems to be at war with itself, and that's what we need to get into.
Yeah. I'm not sure the author really knows who they're writing, and that confusion, it starts right from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's jump right in with our first point. Utilizing specific pop culture metaphors to explain complex medical ethics? Well, it requires a balance between accessibility and gravity to maintain the argument's weight.
And this script it doesn't have that balance? Not at all.
It opens with the Fox variant case, this huge multi-million-dollar verdict, super serious stuff.
Right. And then, almost immediately, we get this incredibly deep dive into Dragon Ball Z.
I mean, I get the intent. I think they're trying to create an analogy.
It's about the character future Gohan losing his arm and how a doctor shouldn't, amputate a healthy limb just to affirm a patient's identity as a one-armed anime character.
On the surface, it's a way to translate a complex idea about irreversible surgery for a specific audience. It's supposed to be shorthand.
But it's really expensive shorthand, isn't it? You have this finite amount of credibility with the listener when you start.
And you're spending it all on explaining Super Saiyans and androids instead of lawsuit?
Exactly. You're juxtaposing a $2 million verdict, a young woman who feels, in her own words, disfigured for life.
With a cartoon where death can literally be reversed with Magic Dragon Ball.
It just trivializes the victim. It's a total category error. And if I don't know who Trunks is, I'm not just confused.
You're locked out of the argument.
I'm completely locked out. I'm busy trying to figure out the anime plot instead of focusing on the negligence of the actual doctors involved.
So the suggestion here isn't necessarily cut the anime completely, though that's one option.
No. It's more about framing. The analogy has to serve the legal point, not the other way around.
Right, so you need to tighten it way, way down.
Make it one sentence. We wouldn't amputate a healthy limb just because a patient identifies as a fictional warrior. Boom, done.
And then you pivot immediately back to the real drama.
Back to the mother's testimony. Back to her saying she was coerced by this narrative about suicide. That's the horror story. The cartoon is a distraction.
Use the actual quote from Varian about being disfigured for life. Let the reality of the court documents do the work.
Honestly, the jury's verdict, the $1.6 million for pain and suffering alone, that does all the work for you. You don't need Goku's help when you have a New York jury on your side.
Okay, so moving from that, this tonal whiplash you mentioned, it gets so much more severe.
Oh, it really does.
Which brings us to the second point. It is incredibly difficult to establish a consistent baseline of credibility when you're vacillating between serious investigative claims and hyperbolic shitposting.
Yeah, this is where the script goes from just being distracting to, I think, being actively self-sabotaging.
We go from the Varian verdict straight into the Epstein network.
And Zohan Mamdani specifically.
And this is where the line between journalism and just, internet memes completely vanishes.
It goes from citing Westchester County Supreme Court rulings to floating this idea that Mamdani is Epstein's biological son.
Look, I get the chaotic energy they're going for. It's that internet sleuth vibe. They point out his mother knew Epstein. They talk about a physical resemblance.
But then the host immediately says, and this is a quote, "I personally don't think that's the case."
That's a fatal admission.
It is! You're telling the audience, I just wasted your time with something I don't even believe myself.
So why should I believe what comes next?
Exactly. Why should I take the claims about Dr. Jess Ting's research grant seriously when the segment right before it was just, a joke?
It's the boy who cried wolf. By the time you get to the actual wolf, the funding documents, nobody's listening anymore.
And there is a wolf. That's the frustrating part. The documentation about the funding for the Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery is real. It's solid.
But the transition is so jarring because we just spent 5 minutes laughing about deep state plants.
So the fix here seems pretty clear. You have to create a much sharper demarcation between the hard news analysis and the, let's call it, speculative entertainment.
You have to separate them, build a wall between them.
Right. Frame the whole Mamdani thing explicitly as internet rumor control. Acknowledge the memes, have a laugh, and then shut the door hard.
You could even use a transition. Something like, okay, while the memes are funny, the documents show a much darker, verified reality.
Yes, that signals to the listener, playtime is over, now we're serious. It protects the integrity of the actual reporting.
And that reporting, it makes some really bold claims.
Which leads us right to the third major issue.
Right. When you're presenting these explosive allegations that link a public figure to a whole social movement, your argument needs specific textual evidence to bridge the gap between correlation and causation.
This script has what I'd call connective tissue deficiency.
Ha, I like that.
I mean, we get point A. Epstein funded some of Dr. Jess Ting's work.
And we get point B. Epstein sent some weird emails to a biologist about hormones.
And the script immediately leaps to point Z. Epstein single-handedly created the modern trans rights movement to groom children.
It's just presented as an absolute fact. No hesitation.
And that's where it loses people. It's such a huge claim that it's actually easy to dismiss. It feels less like an expose and more like a rant.
But if the claim were tighter?
If the claim were, Epstein's money influenced the direction of early medical research in New York, well, you can actually prove that with the evidence they provide.
The script literally has the evidence. It quotes an email about molecular control over development and blocking testosterone receptors.
That email is the smoking gun, but it's buried under all this hyperbole. The suggestion is to zoom in on that text.
Focus on what the emails actually say.
Ask the question, why was a financier so interested in this specific biological mechanism? Let the audience connect those dots.
You're saying strengthen the argument by focusing on the specifics of the money and the emails, rather than jumping to the most extreme conclusion possible.
Take the other email, the one about the 3-year-old.
That's the most disturbing piece of evidence in the whole thing.
It's chilling. Epstein talking about a 3-year-old son with trans tendons. I mean, if I were editing this, I would cut all the global conspiracy stuff and build the entire argument around that.
Because it proves intent. It proves interest in minors.
Without having to invent this grand theory of everything. It's surgical. You trade a sledgehammer for a scalpel. It's much harder for a skeptic to argue against a time-stamped email than a broad conspiracy.
It turns it from a rant into an indictment.
Exactly, which is vital if you want to be taken seriously.
And speaking of being taken seriously, we have to talk about the language, the actual words being used here.
Yes, we do.
And that's our final point. The use of extreme, exclusionary vernacular just limits the material's ability to persuade anyone outside of its existing in-group.
It's a fortress of slang. The script is written in this very specific dialect of internet dissident.
You've got glazing, W's, L's, based, which is fine for a certain audience.
But then it gets much darker. You've got slurs like retards. You've got talk about goyim, phrases like demon-worshipping satanic cult.
And that whole tangent about an anti-Semite civil war with Nick Flentis.
To a general audience, that is completely impenetrable. It's inside baseball for a league nobody else is even watching.
But they're building this giant wall around their argument. It's the in-group paradox. The very language you use to prove you're authentic to your fans is what pushes everyone else away.
It's completely self-defeating. The script's own goal is to expose a crime against humanity. If you believe that, don't you want to warn as many people as possible?
You'd think so. You'd want to warn parents, voters.
Well, a normal parent is going to turn this off in 30 seconds. The language makes the author sound like a fringe radical, not a whistleblower.
There's a moment in the script where it makes a really sharp point. It's about the definition of miscarriage versus induced abortion in some YouTube notes.
It's a genuinely smart observation about language.
It is. It shows the author can do real analysis, but then they immediately follow it up by just screaming, "These people are F."
And it completely undercuts the intellectual point. Same with calling the doctors monsters or quacks.
It just feels good to say. Maybe.
But calling them negligent, manipulative, liable for malpractice, those are the juries. They hit so much harder because they're objective.
So the suggestion is really to calibrate the language to match the severity of the topic. If you're exposing a crime, your language needs to be precise and severe, not just chaotic and abusive.
Swap out the name-calling for the legal description, and instead of the inflammatory racial stuff, focus on the hypocrisy of the elite establishment protecting its own. You can make that connection without alienating 99% of your potential audience.
So it really comes down to a choice, doesn't it? Does the author want to vent to their existing audience, or do they want to actually persuade people?
That's the core question. If the goal is just content for the based crowd, fine. But if it's a serious indictment, you have to clean up the signal.
And the tragedy is, the signal is there. The court case is real. The emails are real. There is gold in this script.
But it's buried under so much mud. You just want them to wash it off. Respect the subject matter. You wouldn't use Twitch emotes in a closing argument at a murder trial.
Well put. Okay, let's wrap this up with an action plan for our listener.
Let's do it. 4 main things to focus on.
First,
Refine your analogy. The future Gohan reference either has to be cut way down to a single sentence or it has to go. Don't let the cartoon overshadow the victim's reality. Second, separate fact from satire. You need a hard wall between the Zoran Mamdani memes and the serious reporting on the Epstein funding. Use clear transitions so your audience knows what's a joke and what's a fact.
Third is about logic. Bridge the logical gap. Use the specific email evidence, especially the one about the 3-year-old, to prove intent and influence. Don't just assert a giant conspiracy. Show us the evidence that makes your case.
And finally, and maybe most important, elevate the vocabulary. Cut the internet slang and the slurred. Let the power of the evidence speak for itself. You want to warn the public, not just yell at them.
This is a heavy piece of work, with the potential to be a really devastating one.
I would love to see a version that reflects these changes. The information is too important to get lost in the noise.
We look forward to seeing the next draft. Once you've made the edit, please submit it again. Thanks for listening to The Critique.